The promise under the stars. The night sky above Outpost Helion was full of cold light. Stars burned far away, silent and uncaring, but for him, one of those stars meant everything. Captain Ryland stood alone on the platform, wind biting at his face. In his hand, he held a torn piece of cloth, the crest of the Thalirian royal house, deep blue with silver threads. It had been ripped from a banner on a battlefield 10 years ago. Back then, it had been a symbol of hope. Now, it was the only proof that her promise had been real. He closed his eyes and remembered the night he had met her. It was during the siege of Drosk. The 5th Human forces were fighting alongside the Thalirians against the Karak invaders. He had been a young soldier then, armed with nothing but an old rifle and the stubborn will to survive. In the chaos of the city's collapse, he found her not dressed in royal robes, but in blood-stained armor, holding a blade too heavy for her arms. She was cornered by Karak raiders, her guard dead, her breathing ragged. Ryland didn't think. He charged in, firing until his weapon clicked empty, then swinging the butt like a hammer. The fight was brutal and short. When it was over, she was still alive, staring at him with eyes the color of frozen seas. "You risked your life for me," she had said in a voice that carried both pride and surprise. "I didn't know you were anyone important," he replied, catching his breath. That was when she smiled, not the polite, cold smile of royalty, but something real. "Then your act was pure. You saved me not because of my crown, but because I was in need. That is rare." She had taken his hand then, and with the sound of war in the distance, she made him a vow. "When the war ends, if you are alive, I will find you, and we will be united. This I swear." For 10 years, Ryland carried those words like a hidden flame. Wars ended. Borders changed. He left the military and became a trader, wandering between the quiet backwater worlds where politics could not reach him. But the Queen never came, until tonight. His wrist crackled. A message had arrived through a secure channel, one that hadn't been used since the war. He opened it, and the image of the royal crest filled the small screen. Beneath it were only 3 words in the Thalirian tongue: "I have returned." Ryland's pulse quickened. After all this time, after thinking maybe it had been a kind lie told in the heat of battle, she had called for him. But another part of his mind whispered caution. Why now? Why after 10 years of silence? He walked toward his small ship, the Silver Wing. The platform was empty, except for a lone maintenance droid. But as he approached the boarding ramp, he noticed something strange, a shadow moving where there shouldn't be one. Who's there? He called out. No answer. He reached for the pistol at his side, eyes scanning the dark. For a moment, the only sound was the wind. Then a figure stepped from behind the fuel tanks, a tall man in dark armor, helmet hiding his face. "You are Ryland," the figure said, voice low and mechanical. It wasn't a question. Who's asking? The man tilted his head slightly. "The Queen is in danger. If you go to her, you'll die. Turn around. Forget the message." Before Ryland could reply, the man activated a cloaking device and vanished into the night. Ryland stood frozen for a moment, the warning echoing in his mind. He had spent a decade waiting for her, dreaming of that moment when they would meet again. Now, someone wanted him to stay away. He stepped onto the Silver Wing and began powering up the engines. Danger or not, warning or not, he had to know the truth. The ship's systems hummed to life, and the stars shifted in the viewport as he set a course for the Thalirian royal moon. But deep inside, he knew this was no simple reunion. Promises made in war have a cost, and whatever awaited him out there among the stars, it would change his life forever. As the ship left the outpost and vanished into hyperspace. Rylan glanced once more at the crest lying on the console. He whispered to himself, "You kept your word, my queen. Now let's see why." Asterisk the summons from a dying throne. The silver wing dropped out of hyperspace with a shudder, its hull groaning as if the ship itself didn't like where it had arrived. Outside the viewport stretched the gleaming rings of the Valerian royal moon, bright and beautiful against the black void. But beauty meant nothing in deep space. Beauty could hide knives. Rylan sat in the pilot's seat, one hand on the throttle, the other resting on the grip of his pistol. He couldn't forget the shadowed man's warning back at Outpost Helion. If you go to her, you will die. The Queen's personal escort ship was supposed to meet him here, but the empty space felt wrong. Then, without warning, a blip appeared. On the scanner, no. 3 blips. The com crackled. Unidentified human vessel. Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. The voice was cold, accented, and not Valerian. Rylan's eyes narrowed. Karak raiders. The same species that had nearly killed the Queen all those years ago. The same enemy he thought had been driven into the dark corners of the galaxy. They must have been waiting for him. Before they could fire, Rylan yanked the throttle forward, diving his ship straight into the thickest part of the moon's rings. Ice and rock, chunks the size of houses, tumbled past, smashing against his shields. The raiders followed, their weapons flashing between the drifting debris. The silver wing was small, fast and stubborn, much like its pilot. He weaved through gaps so tight his wingtips scraped frozen stone. The raiders were bigger, slower. 2 of them clipped ring fragments and spun out, disappearing into the cold. The third kept coming. Rylan cut his engine suddenly, letting the raider overshoot. One clean burst from his forward cannons, and the pirate ship exploded in a silent flash of fire. He didn't have time to celebrate. A new signal lit up his scanner, a Valerian royal cruiser, crest glowing bright across its bow. The com hissed. Alive again, this time with a familiar, rich voice. "Captain Rylan." The Queen's tone was calm, but carried urgency. "You are late." He tried to hide his smile. "Had to fight through some old enemies on the way. Seems your moon isn't as safe as it looks." "You have more enemies than you know," she replied. "Dock immediately. We must speak before the council hears of your arrival." The cruiser guided him through a shimmering energy field that wrapped the royal moon's dock. Guards in silver armor watched silently as he stepped off his ship. The Queen was not there to greet him. Instead, an older Valerian woman in a black cloak approached. "Follow me," she said without introduction. Her voice was low, careful. "There are ears everywhere." They moved quickly through the grand halls of the moon, towering pillars of crystal, walls etched with silver lines that shimmered faintly. But beneath the beauty, Rylan sensed tension. Every guard's eyes lingered on him. Every servant seemed to vanish into side halls as they passed. Finally, they entered a private chamber lit only by a fire pit in the center. And there she was. Queen sat on a low couch, no crown, no ceremonial robes, only a simple silver tunic. She looked older than when he had last seen her, but her eyes were exactly the same, sharp, cold, and alive with something unspoken. 10 years, Rylan said, standing before her. "And now you call me." "I swore I would," she replied, but her voice held no warmth. "Do you know what your presence here means?" He shrugged slightly. "That you kept your promise?" Her gaze hardened. "It means war, Rylan. My council wants me bound to a noble house to keep the throne. You are unacceptable to them. And to my enemies, your return is the perfect reason to move against me." Rylan leaned forward, his voice steady. "Then why send for me?" "Because," she said slowly, "you are the only one I trust to guard my life. And because my promise was not only personal, it was political. You saved me once." Now I need you to save an entire throne." Before he could answer, the chamber door slammed open. A royal guard stumbled inside, armor dented, blood trailing from a gash on his cheek. "Your Majesty," the guard panted. "The rebel fleet? They've broken through the outer defenses." The queen rose, her eyes locking. "On Rylance, your trial begins now." The queen's shadow, the throne room of the Thalarian royal moon, was nothing like Ryland remembered from wartime halls. It wasn't the golden hall of ceremony. This one was older, darker. A war chamber. Black crystal walls reflected the flicker of holographic star maps, and the air smelled faintly of metal and cold incense. Ryland stood beside the queen as her council argued, their voices sharp and venomous. None of them looked at him as an ally, only as an intruder. "He cannot stay," one of the elder nobles hissed, his long robe sweeping the floor. "A human has no place at your side, Majesty. His very presence is an insult to the royal bloodline." Another counselor, tall and armored, slammed a fist onto the table. "The rebels already call you weak. Marry outside the royal houses, and they will call you unfit to rule. We cannot risk it." The queen listened without blinking, her hands folded in her lap. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, but it cut through the room like a blade. "This human saved my life when all of you were far from the battlefield. He faced death for me without knowing my name. That is more loyalty than most of my blood has shown me." That silenced them for a moment, but Ryland knew it wouldn't last. These people didn't want him here. They wanted him gone or dead. When the meeting ended, the queen led him through a narrow side corridor, away from the grand halls and into quieter, dimly lit passages. Guards followed at a distance, but Ryland noticed something odd. More than once, they passed doorways where he felt eyes watching from the dark. Finally, in a private chamber with heavy silver curtains, she spoke plainly. "I called you here because you are the only one I can trust. But there is more." Raylan raised an eyebrow. "More than being the only man you trust?" Her lips curved into a faint smile, but it faded quickly. "The rebels have been growing stronger for years. They believe I am unworthy because I refuse to rule with an iron fist. They want to replace me with my cousin, Lord Kale, who would gladly put my head on the palace gates." Ryland folded his arms. "So, where do I come in?" She stepped closer, her gaze locking with his. "My council has demanded that, if you wish to remain here, you must prove yourself. They have arranged a trial." "A trial?" Her eyes darkened. "A blood trial. Ancient Thalarian law. You will enter the arena and face opponents chosen by the council. If you win, they will have no right to challenge your presence here. If you lose—" She didn't finish the sentence. "Let me guess," Ryland said quietly. "They get rid of me without having to start a scandal." The queen didn't deny it. "I will do everything I can to make sure the fight is fair, but these men do not play fair." Ryland took a slow breath. "And what about the rebels breaking through your defenses?" "That's not exactly the best time for a tournament." Her voice softened. "The trial is more than tradition. It is a message. If you win, you will be seen as my chosen protector, and the rebels will think twice before striking. If you lose, they will strike immediately." Before Ryland could answer, the sound of approaching boots filled the hall outside. A guard stepped in, bowing low. "Your Majesty, the trial will begin at first light. The council demands the human be placed under. Watch until then." The queen's eyes flashed with anger, but she nodded. "Very well. Escort him to the guest wing." As Ryland walked out between two guards, he glanced back at her. She stood perfectly still, her gaze following him until the doors shut between them. In the guest wing, his quarters were spacious, but cold, more prison than comfort. He checked the window, noting the steep drop to the moon's lower terraces. No escape without a ship. As he sat on the edge of the bed, the shadowed warning from Outpost Helion came back to him. If you go to her, you will die. Now, he knew exactly how that could happen. And yet, deep inside, he wasn't planning to back out. Not now. Not after 10 years. Somewhere in the palace, the queen was standing against enemies on all sides. And tomorrow, in front of an entire empire, he would fight to prove her promise meant something. The trial of blood and honor. The arena was older than the palace itself, a colossal ring of black stone, open to the alien sky. Twin suns burned above, casting sharp shadows across the ground. Around the edge, tier upon tier of alien faces stared down at the sand below. Some wore the queen's colors. Others wore the crimson crest of her cousin, Lord Kale. All of them came for blood. Raylan stood in the center, wearing light combat armor. No helmet. No shield. The council had insisted he fight as a warrior of honor, which really meant less protection, more spectacle. Above him, in a shaded balcony, the queen sat on a high throne. She looked calm, but her fingers gripped the armrest tight. A deep gong echoed. The gates opposite Ryland slid open, and 3 figures stepped into the arena. The first was a hulking Thalirian soldier in full plate armor, carrying a warhammer that could crush a human skull in one blow. The second was smaller but faster, a female duelist with twin blades, her movements like a predator's. The third made the crowd roar. Lord Kale himself, tall, broad, wearing a half-mask of silver, his eyes locked on Ryland with pure hate. So, they really want me dead, Ryland muttered under his breath. The gong sounded again. The trial had begun. The armored soldier charged first, hammer raised high. Ryland sidestepped just in time, the hammer smashing into the sand where he'd been standing. Using the soldier's momentum, Ryland drove his elbow into the man's side and rolled away before the return swing came. But the duelist was already there, her blades flashing. Ryland barely blocked with his forearm guard, sparks flying as steel scraped metal. He countered with a quick kick, knocking her back a step, but not for long, and Kale came in from the side, striking fast with a spear. Ryland ducked, the tip slicing. A line through his armor. The crowd shouted, some cheering his name, others calling for his blood. For minutes, it was chaos, Ryland using speed and agility to stay alive while the 3 enemies circled him. The soldier's brute strength, the duelist's speed, and Kale's precision kept him on the edge of defeat. But Ryland wasn't just fighting, he was watching, waiting. When the armored soldier swung wide again, Ryland ducked low, grabbed a handful of sand, and flung it into the duelist's eyes. She cried out, stumbling back, and Ryland spun into a kick that sent her to the ground. The soldier roared and came at him again, but this time, Ryland sidestepped and let the big man's hammer smash into Kale's spear. The weapon snapped in. 2. Kale staggered, shocked. Ryland didn't waste the moment. He lunged, grabbing Kale by the collar and driving him back toward the edge of the arena. The crowd went wild, some in horror, some in excitement. Kale spat blood. You don't belong here, human. Neither do tyrants, Ryland shot back, and slammed him into the wall. Before he could finish the fight, a deafening explosion shook the arena. One of the upper walls crumbled, and smoke poured in. Shouts erupted as black-armored figures descended on jetpacks, the rebels. The trial was over. This was no staged fight anymore. Blaster fire lit the air. The crowd panicked, scattering. The Queen's guards rushed to shield her, but Ryland could see she was exposed on the balcony. Without thinking, he grabbed the fallen duelist's blade and sprinted through the chaos. 2 rebels dropped in front of him. He cut one down, tackled the other, and kept moving. The Queen turned just as he reached her, pulling her behind a column. as a blaster bolt scorched the floor where she'd been standing. "You never follow the plan," she said, breathless. "I don't like plans that end with you dead." Rylan replied, eyes scanning for more attackers. In that moment, she gave him a look that was more than gratitude. It was trust. Deep and absolute. The battle in the arena raged on, but together they fought their way toward the inner palace. And though the trial had been interrupted, one thing was clear to everyone who had seen it. The human had faced 3 of their finest, and survived. Rumors would spread by nightfall. The Queen's chosen protector bleeds for her. The rebels had better fear him. Asterisk. The choice that shook the Empire. The royal court was never silent. Even in the middle of the night, whispers drifted through its silver halls. But tonight, the silence was different, tense, heavy, waiting to break. Every noble in the Valyrian Empire had gathered in the Great Hall. The floor was a mirror of polished obsidian, the walls lined with banners of ancient royal houses. Above, the Queen's throne shone under a shaft of cold light. The Queen sat there now, straight-backed, every movement measured. On her left stood Lord Cale in his ceremonial armor, face clean and handsome, the perfect image of a royal consort. On her right stood Rylan, still in the scarred armor from the arena, the duelist's blade at his side, a reminder of the trial that had nearly killed him. The council's chief elder stepped forward, voice ringing through the hall. "Your Majesty, the Empire demands stability. The rebels grow bolder each day. Tonight, you will make your choice." The words rippled through the crowd. Everyone knew what this meant. She would either bind herself to Lord Cale and secure the noble houses, or stand with the human who had no place in their bloodlines. Raylan felt every eye in the room burning into him. He had survived the trial, the ambush, the rebels' attack. But this was the real battlefield. Cale stepped forward first. His voice was smooth, almost gentle. "Cousin, you know what the people need. A ruler who keeps our traditions. Pure. Marry me, and we will crush the rebels together." Marry him. Cale's eyes slid to Rylan, cold and sharp. "And you will see the Empire torn apart." The Queen's gaze didn't waver. "You speak of tradition, Cale, but I speak of truth. The truth is that I have stood in battle beside both of you. One of you saw my life as a means to power. The other saw my life as worth saving, even when he thought I was no one." The elder cleared his throat. "Your Majesty." She raised her hand, silencing him. The entire hall leaned forward. Raylan's gut told him what she should do for the sake of her crown. Choose Cale. Secure the throne. Keep the nobles happy. And yet, she was looking at him like she had 10 years ago in the smoke and blood of Drosk V. He took a step forward, voice steady. "If choosing me puts you in danger, say the word, and I'll walk out that door. I didn't come here to take your throne from you." Her lips curved, but there was no humor in it. "You misunderstand. If you walk out that door, I lose more than a throne." She rose, the long folds of her silver cloak whispering over the floor. The light caught the silver markings on her skin, each one a symbol of her royal bloodline. She stepped past Cale. Without looking at him, "I keep my promises," she said, her voice carrying through the hall. And then she stood beside Rylan, facing the entire court. Gasps and shouts erupted. Cale's face twisted, his mask of calm cracking. Some nobles stormed out immediately. Others just stared, shocked that their queen had chosen a human over centuries of tradition. "This is my consort," the queen declared. "He will stand at my side, in peace and in war. Those who cannot accept it can take their grievances to the stars." The hall exploded with noise-angry shouts, defiant cheers. Somewhere above the din, Rylan thought he heard the faintest, coldest laugh from Cale. That sound worried him more than the anger in the room. Asterisk. The Queen's claim. The choice had been made. Hours after the Queen stood beside Rylan in the Great Hall, the royal moon felt different. The banner still hung, the guards still patrolled, but an unease hummed in the air like the low growl of a storm waiting to break. Rylan stood at the balcony of the Queen's private chambers, looking out at the endless stars. Somewhere, in that darkness, rebels plotted, nobles whispered, and Cale, humiliated but alive, was no doubt sharpening his knives. Behind him, the Queen entered, her silver cloak replaced with a light travel tunic. She looked younger without the weight of ceremony on her shoulders. Still, her eyes held that same steady fire. "You should rest," Rylan said, not turning from the view. "I can't," she replied. "Not after today. You saw their faces? Half the court wants me dead now. The other half wants you gone. Staying here would be suicide." He turned to face her. "So what's the plan?" Instead of answering, she stepped closer, placing a small device on the table. It projected a rotating hologram of a starship, a sleek war cruiser, all black with silver markings. "This is the Varus," she said. "Fast, armed, loyal only to me. It will be our home from now on." Rylan raised an eyebrow. "Our home?" Her lips curved. "I didn't just claim you in front of the court for their benefit. I meant it. You're mine, Rylan, and I'm yours. No council, no crown will change that." Before he could respond, the lights in the chamber flickered. A faint hiss came from the ventilation system. His instinct screamed, "Get down!" He shouted, shoving her behind the heavy desk, just as the balcony doors blew inward. 3 masked assassins in dark armor stormed in, blasters already firing. Rylan rolled across the floor, grabbing the blade he'd kept from the trial. A bolt scorched the wall, where his head had been seconds before. He lunged at the first attacker, driving the sword through the joint in the armor. The man collapsed without a sound. The Queen wasn't idle. She had drawn a concealed energy pistol from her belt, dropping the second assassin with a clean shot to the chest. The last one charged her, blade raised, but Rylan intercepted, locking weapons before twisting the assassin's arm until the bone cracked. When it was over, the room smelled of ozone and scorched metal. The Queen straightened, brushing dust from her tunic. "Cale?" Rylan asked, breathing hard. "Who else?" she said bitterly. "He'll keep sending them until one succeeds. Then we need to leave now." Within the hour, the Varus slipped away from the royal moon under the cover of a supply convoy. As the ship cleared orbit, the Queen and Rylan stood side by side on the bridge, watching the planet shrink into the distance. "This isn't running," she said quietly. "This is choosing our own battleground." Rylan glanced at her. "And what's the battleground?" She looked out at the stars, a hint of a smile on her lips. "Anywhere they think we won't show up. And then we do." The stars blurred as the Varus jumped into hyperspace, its engines humming like the start of a new era. Rylan rested his hand lightly on the hilt of his sword. "So, we're not just hiding?" Her smile deepened. "No, Captain, we're hunting." For the first time since she sent that message, Rylan felt the weight of the 10 years between them lift. Whatever the galaxy threw at them next, they would face it together, an alien queen and the human who never let go of her promise. And somewhere, far behind them, Cale would be watching the stars, wondering when his turn would come. Asterisk